Okay, so I'm gonna get started. Looks like a small group, but I have some slides to show you. I have basically three agendas for today. First is to remind you of the ways in which you should construct a kind of framework for the thesis project. In a way, repeat some of the things that I had talked to you about before the summer. I think at that time it's rather conceptual, but now that you're in it, what I say and what I had said before will make in a way more sense. Number two is to just go over some of the representation requirements briefly. And the third point is maybe if you have questions, we can have a discussion. So some of the slides you might have seen it before. Who has a site confirmed? Program site confirmed. Really, by now you should have at least one or two, if not three. Okay, so before I had shown this quote before. So now you can read it yourself again. Yeah, it says any student currently working on his or her thesis will attest to the supreme difficulty. So the project doesn't fight back because you're the one that's kind of setting up these parameters. You don't have a M1 tutor that's establishing these criteria for you. It's very difficult, right? So there's no resistance. There's no encouragement either, because there's a lot of variables that are yet determined. Especially if you don't have a site, if you don't have a program. So where do you go? How do you conduct your project? So what I'm going to show are, you can barely see it. So on the sides there are a number of points, which I think the PDF was sent to you before. So even though I'm going to present linearly, these things are not necessarily linear. It goes back and forth, back and forth. So the beginning has to do with this idea of the motivation, the intention for the thesis. That is something that that nobody can in a way. I mean, a true thesis, you come up with this motivation, and then through the process of these 2 semesters, you will end at some point, right, by defending your thesis with argumentations. Okay, so these are the points I will try to cover today. So again, it's not that you go through these step by step linearly. Sometimes you have to go back a step, right? As with everything, you kind of want to define it before you engage in the work. So this is a kind of a dictionary definition of a thesis. A statement or theory that is put forward as a premise to be maintained or proven. This is broader, right? It's kind of let's say you can link this to a scientific definition or in the field of science. But the point is that it is something that is not a factual statement that you're putting out. It is a statement that needs to be argued and supported by evidence. Evidence as in work. So, so thesis is not factual statements. It is a question, an idea that requires defense. So a thesis is a claimed statement. So it's not a factual statement, it's a claimed statement For example, cancer is bad for you. That's not a thesis, that's factual. Cancer is bad for you, but eating French fries will help to prevent it. That could be a thesis statement, but it needs to be proven. But you can't just throw a statement and somehow expect that to be a thesis. It needs to be allowed for debate. Yeah. So that's in a way the general definition of thesis. But in architecture thesis, you need to materialize this. The definition that I mentioned before, in a way, all holds true. But in the architecture thesis, it needs to be materialized. Sometimes, or oftentimes, it's less scientific than that in terms of how do you prove it. Right? It's not a formula that you can prove it. Sometimes it's slightly more subjective. Right? Okay, so what is an architectural thesis? I'm being very honest with you in this meeting. What is an architectural thesis? Is that it needs to be within the discipline, right, of architecture. But that definition is somewhat broad. So in my opinion, so I put building or not, but some architectural thesis has to be represented in a building representation. Some schools, other schools may not be. I think we're somewhere in between, but closer to expecting, right, a building project as the representation of architectural thesis. So it's neither fantasy or concrete reality. It's within this spectrum. But I'd say CUHK closer, right, to the building. Contextual, depending on the school. So you go to Sci-R, you go to different schools. It's very different, like what the definition of a thesis is. But in a way, it's you need to know that, but it's kind of irrelevant. We're here, we're in Hong Kong, CUHK. We kind of want to work with what the say the rules and regulation is right here. The differences between thesis, project, and a project or a master project. I'll maybe go to that a little bit later, but to me, there is a difference between the two. So what could be a architectural thesis, right? A statement. Say, for example, it could be there are a high number of homeless people living in Yamate. That's not quite a thesis or quite an architectural thesis because it's most likely a factual, right, statement. So no one can argue against that. It's not really open for debate. But if I change that statement to say, homeless people in Yamate should be given the access to services such as regular food donation, public restrooms, and camping facilities, because it would improve life for all the people in the city. So that is then a kind of a hypothesis, right? That's a question. It needs to be proven. So that becomes debatable, right? And then all of a sudden, the public restroom or the camping facility becomes a possible operation for architecture. Right? It's not a social problem, but it becomes a point for which you guys can tackle. You're not politicians, you're not setting policies. You need to understand those things, but this has to be very disciplinary. Is that pretty clear? Okay. I put this out. Is it absolute? As in, is a thesis project absolute? this is the chart. It's more, say, US oriented, but the point being that it's not absolutely that everybody has to do an architectural thesis. So some schools, there is no thesis, but you just do another M1 studio. In fact, I didn't want to do a thesis because I paid a lot of money for my tuition. Why should I go and study primarily on my own? I wanted to work with somebody. So it's not always the situation where you have to do a thesis. So, okay, let's go back to this idea of the motivation. Right? So everybody has a motivation by now. You kind of know what you want to do, whether it's related to a site, program, an issue, a building typology. So I'm going to use the concert hall right, as an example. And you can plug in whatever you want, public space or heritage architecture. So you can swap them, or you could plug yours in. First thing you have to do is you got to ask questions. Right? Again, it's not a statement, right? If it's a statement, you don't have a thesis. You're just designing something. The hypothesis here is I put provisional, right? It's just the starting point. The first question, hypothesis will have to change over the course of the semester. So, for example, like the what if, right? So you have an interest to design, look at this issue or this type that is called concert hall. But the first thing you want to know is you ask questions. What if the concert is not what we know it to be? A very general question, because you don't really know the specific sort of issues yet, right? Because you just started. But you kind of know what you are interested in to work with. And then, how do you know what questions to ask? Ask the questions that you are able to ask. If you don't even know how to ask the question, maybe that's not quite the topic you want to know. Sometimes it has to do with prior knowledge, which is to say, hey, I worked on the M1, on a museum, an archive. I know a little bit about it. So I'm going to ask a question related to this topic. Could be public space, could be. Yeah. So you ask this initial set of questions, kind of broad. The questions are there for you to work, right? To find out what are the known facts about concert halls. I use facts, maybe too strong of a word, but to really just get your attention. Right? The analysis, the research is about getting to the knowledge, or the existing knowledge. What are the existing knowledge that are related to the concert hall? Okay, so what are the facts? Asking questions so that you can find answers to. Regarding this building type. Okay. Then you do research. What does that mean, research? The English word have these kind of interesting binary relationships. You first search so that you can research to learn more about it. You can find something and then you refine the understanding of that element. Another way to think about it is this word perceiving, right? It's not always about gathering data or doing like very distant kind of research. It could be about how you perceive something, how you read something, how you experience something in order to conceive, right? To take what came in and translate it into something that goes out. Stop me at any point. Okay? So I follow the same logic. I ask. I'm trying to know the facts. I'm trying to find out what a concert hall is. So you ask questions. What is a concert hall? what is a public space? What is a library? What is an archive? If I use that, just to keep it simple or clear, what form, geometry proportion does it take? What materials are they built in? Where and how they are situated in the city? How is it shaped by culture? How does it shape culture in return? These are questions that you're throwing out so that you can find out answers to, so that you can learn about concert halls. I have a quote here, or not really a quote, but so this is written by one of my teachers. Basically, what she's saying is that when she starts a project, she asks questions, right? With no preconceptions, with very little preconceptions. She wants to unlearn. She wants to ask, what is a window? Right? Ask the fundamental questions of what things are, what it is. So for her, in order to learn, you have to kind of unlearn, so that you can really absorb the things, yeah? The knowledge. So then you can create something that is fundamentally new. So here are three images. Okay, the image on the left, the Chrysler building, a tower, by Van Allen. 3 towers, right? But at some point, somebody asked the question, what is a tower? Could the tower be something other than what we know it to be? So the first time, you have Eisenman proposing maybe a twin tower conjoining, or a tower that's been kind of looped, wasn't built. So then the next guy comes in and take that and try to in a way realize it, and that requires the questioning really. Right? Okay, so that's hypothesis, analysis. Analysis are about asking questions, gathering evidence, and to do so, you have to find a method to learn about that topic. So, back to the concert hall. What is a concert hall? That becomes somewhat maybe theoretical and philosophical. You then have to go into the literature side to find out what were the definitions that came before you, right? So then that your thesis can contribute to the topic. Right? What form does it take? It becomes maybe a more spatial study. Right? So do you make drawings? Right? Do you make scale drawings so you compare the sight lines? You draw sections, you compare the sideline, the kind of performer and the audience relationship. You look at the intimacies between the audience and the performer. What materials then? What methods are you going about to get to know the topic? So I purposely put these that is somewhat more architectural, right? Material, right? How this theater is situated, right? Is it situated in the city, the heart of the city, the edge of the city, and so on? Right? Sometimes you have to go a bit on the data connection, right? To see how much impact this theater have generated in terms of certain revenues or something. But so it is important, right, to develop a method to get to know the topic. Sometimes data, numbers, sometimes empirical research, right? Developing mixtures of methods that you have learned previously, but you might have to sometimes invent something not brand new thing, but something small to start with. Okay, so we have an image, right, a plan of the Carnegie Hall, one of the best sounding spaces in America. Right. So it is sited, right, located in the city on a corner addition. It's essentially a shoebox. Right? It has finishes in plaster and stone. So you learn about this project. Right? So I have, in a way, symmetrical order. Right? Audience, performer, built in the late 19th century. Right? And outside, maybe it doesn't kind of convey the character of a theater per se, but it becomes a case study. So once you do that, you might have to then go back to your hypothesis. Right? That's when a revision is needed, right? Because now you know more about the subject that you're looking at. You then re-ask the question, right, with more specificity. For example, you ask, what if? Because now you know that by looking at Carnegie Hall, it's basically a shoebox, it's built in plaster, it's located in the city like this. So then you ask the follow-up questions, right? What if the concert hall does not come in the form of a shoebox? What if the concert hall is not built from stone and plaster? What if the concert hall is not situated in the city? What if the concert hall is not single purpose? You can only ask these questions once you get into the topic, right? Then comes synthesis, right? You're looking, but at some point, right, early on, hopefully, you start to synthesize. You start to change the question from what if to could it be? Right? Because you're going into you're in this kind of proposition mode. You say, could the concert hall be in the form of a vineyard? Could the concert hall be situated on the edge of the city? The vineyard allows the facial expression of the audience to be seen through the performer and so on. So you want to test that. So you turn the question into a proposition. And then you propose. So you come up with a shape, right? Like this. A space like that. Okay? And located on the edge of the city. And then someone else comes along and asks a follow-up question. So don't try to invent a brand new everything that nobody has ever done. Right? Public building inside the mountain, 4,000 miles. You work on something that others have initiated, and you build on top of that. So the next guy comes and says, could the concert hall be in the form of vineyard, but with increased intimacy? Right? While maintaining the same number of seatings, and could the concert hall be situated through a corner approach? Right? In other words, sited